Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Open Mic. I'm at a little bit of a different location here today. We are continuing our series on trying to figure out what is wrong with all of these wrongful convictions that you keep hearing about in the news. It's absolutely crazy. We have two ladies on here today who are running amazing clinics. They're joining forces to solve these problems. First, we have Tricia Bushnell as the director of the Midwest Innocence Project. Say that 3 times fast. The director of the Midwest Innocence Project, and Megan Crane of the MacArthur Justice Center. Their backgrounds are varied and quite extensive, and I want them to introduce themselves to you personally. So let's bring them onto the show right now.
You never know who you're going to see.
Be one guy one-on-one my whole career.
What you're going to hear.
You got a lot of desperate people in the city.
Or what they've got to say.
When you can take people inside of a crime.
That's what you're going to hear on my podcast, Open Mic. Find it where you find your podcasts.
Hello there.
Hi.
How are you both?
Doing well. How are you?
Well, thanks for being here on Open Mic. I've been reading about your backgrounds. I've been reading about this great work. You've just had got somebody out of prison last week that I want to hear about. But Tricia, let's start with you. Give us a little bit about your background and the clinic that you're currently in charge of right now.
Sure. So I'm director at the Midwest Innocence Project. We are a nonprofit organization based in Kansas City, Missouri that represents people who were convicted of crimes they didn't commit and works to bring them home, get them out, and change the system to prevent that from happening from anyone in the first place. Our organization works in 5 states. So we've got Missouri, Kansas, Nebraska, Iowa, and Arkansas. And we work with a lot of partners. So we're super excited. You're gonna hear a little bit more about how we've just started a new partnership with MacArthur Justice Center, but we also partner with the University of Missouri School of Law, the University of Missouri Kansas City School of Law, KU School of Law, and the Iowa State Public Defender's Wrongful Conviction Division. So we work with a lot of different folks to get as many resources as we can to get people home.
That's amazing. I'm hearing a little bit of feedback from somebody here, so I apologize to our listeners, but when we're doing it from home and we're doing it through Zoom, it's what we got to deal with. So, Tricia, you are an attorney too, correct?
I am, and I do actively represent clients, yeah. So I'm actually technically the executive and legal director, but it's the...
All right, well, you got that part out, which, us lawyers, we need to mention that. Megan Crane, tell me about you.
Well, and not to defer back to Tricia momentarily, but I didn't hear her say, maybe I missed it, but she's also currently the president of the Innocence Network across the country. So she's the president of the network that is in charge of coordinating all the projects in all the states.
Which is a huge job, I can only imagine.
Yeah. She wears many
hats. All right, Megan, what are you up to?
Yeah, I am here in St. Louis, Missouri. I'm the co-director of our Missouri office of MacArthur Justice Center. The MacArthur Justice Center is also a legal nonprofit, but we have historically focused on civil rights litigation. So like the Innocence Project, one of our main focuses is holding the state accountable for when they do bad deeds, when there is misconduct. But we have typically done that in the civil context, whether it's civil rights lawsuits under the statute 1983 or civil rights lawsuits on behalf of exonerees, but seeking compensation and seeking to hold the bad actors in their case accountable. What we are super excited about is that through this new partnership with Tricia and the Midwest Innocence Project, which is called our MacArthur Justice Center Wrongful Conviction Project, we are now entering the arena of litigating to exonerate people in the criminal post-conviction context. We've done a couple one-off cases of these throughout the years. I haven't with MacArthur, but my colleagues have in the past. But this is the first time our organization is singularly focused on the laborious labor and time and resource intensive work of getting the person out of prison before they then can file the civil suit to hold the state actors accountable. So we're thrilled that this partnership worked out, and we think it's going to really increase capacity for this work here in Missouri and hopefully decrease the number of years that the wrongfully convicted here have to spend behind bars.
So tell me, I'm confused a little bit before we even dive in. So the litigation that you were discussing, how does that differ from a normal 6500 motion that has to be filed right away? Not right away. That has to be filed for some relief from judgment. You're making it sound different, and I'm ignorant to that. So tell me, how is it different?
Well, I think it depends state to state. Because I have litigated at least one case and as a student, some additional cases in Michigan, I'm familiar with the 6500 motion. That is one of the forms of post-conviction litigation I'm talking about.
Okay.
They're called different things in different states. Here in Missouri, it's called a Rule 91 state habeas petition.
Okay.
But that is typically the vehicle we're using in state courts when we try to overturn someone's wrongful conviction through, I was calling it criminal post-conviction litigation, but that's kind of a broad umbrella term for the motions we might file in the state court or in the federal court. And they just have different names state to state. The different animal that I was referencing, which I'm sure you're familiar with, Mike, is the civil rights lawsuit that might come afterwards once someone is officially exonerated and their wrongful conviction is overturned. Many exonerees, if there is clear misconduct in their case, will have the ability and the right to file a civil suit against the state actors and perhaps the county or the police department or the city, and hopefully get some financial compensation for the wrongs that were done to them.
Well, in every state, there is different. Some have some decent laws. I haven't seen any great laws. And maybe we could get some really great federal laws if we ever get our act together in Congress. But because, like in Michigan, it's a $50,000 max. I've seen in some states where there is a max, which would probably be on the better side, right? With having no max where you could sue and get full compensation. But I mean, that's a different conversation. So Tricia, tell me about this. Tell me about this merger or partnership. Is it a merger? Is it a partnership? And how can it help get more people out of prison who are wrongfully convicted?
Yeah, well, it is a partnership. So we're still independent organizations. But just like we do with all of our other partners, we're going to be working cases together and to have sort of an understanding of what that looks like. So, the Midwest Innocence Project works in 5 states. We now have partners in a number of those different states. And at MIP, we do all of the intake. So if somebody is claiming innocence and wants assistance on overturning their conviction, they apply to the Midwest Innocence Project. And staff at MIP begins this very long, rigorous intake process. And then we start working with our partners when we're able to place them to be investigated and litigated. And so what that means now that MacArthur's come on, MacArthur is one of the partners where we will be able to place applicants in their cases to be investigated and litigated by Megan in the wrongful conviction division at MacArthur. And what that means is we have more lawyers, we have more resources, we have more people. We can move more cases more quickly, and that will hopefully bring relief. What's particularly important about the partnership with MacArthur is that they are based in St. Louis. So at MIP, even though we're in 5 states, the vast majority of our applications actually come out of 2 states. That's Missouri and Arkansas. And in Missouri, we have about 400 people at any given moment who are waiting for assistance. And about half of those people are specifically out of St. Louis City or St. Louis County. So to have not only additional lawyers and resources, but to have them be based in St. Louis, where we know we have such a great need, is a huge boon for folks who are wrongfully convicted and waiting to have their case reviewed.
And you're covering 5 states and the majority is coming out of a single city. What are the trends that you're seeing that are coming out of St. Louis? I mean, that sounds like a powder keg right there.
I mean, it is. I think, we were talking a little bit about this before we started recording, but we now, we know that state misconduct, prosecutor misconduct, law enforcement misconduct is a leading cause of wrongful conviction cases, right? In more than 50% of all of the cases that came out in the last national registry of exonerations report. St. Louis is one of those places. There have been historic problems with law enforcement there. You can watch the battles that occur between law enforcement and the reform prosecutors that were elected both in St. Louis City and St. Louis County, right? The first Black prosecutors in both of those jurisdictions, the things that law enforcement have to say. In the Midwest Innocence Project, we're partnered with the law firm of Morgan Pilot and Lathrop Gage. We represent a man where the prosecutor in St. Louis City has done the internal investigation that reviewed and showed the misconduct in their own files. And including our requests for that information, which were continually denied. And she has joined and filed a motion saying our client is innocent and he should come home. And the politics around that, and we see that in places all around the country. St. Louis is one of them. We can say the same thing about other places in our jurisdiction, Kansas City, Kansas, Wyandotte County. We can talk about Chicago, right? We can talk about Baltimore. We can talk about places all around the country where we know there are historic problems coming out of law enforcement and prosecutors' offices. And then you start to see those when you look at where the applications are coming from. You can just track them pretty quickly.
And what kind of things? Oh, go ahead, Becky.
I was just a quick jump in there and comparing to Chicago, and I think we could compare to Detroit too. One thing I want to flag about St. Louis, I grew up in St. Louis. I only recently moved back about 3 years ago to join the MacArthur office here. But I do think a difference with St. Louis is that it hasn't quite had the same reckoning yet with this reality that Chicago certainly has had, and that I think Detroit has started to have. You know, the head prosecutor in St. Louis for nearly 2 decades, up until a couple years ago when Kim Gardner was reelected, has one of the top rates of misconduct in the country. And nobody knows that here. You know, she's still an exalted figure. We have many pre-identified bad apples in the St. Louis City Police Department. Kim Gardner, the new circuit attorney, has 75 police on an exclusion list, meaning she won't put them on the stand. She won't sign off on search warrants for them. And we don't have that big a police force. So 75 is a significant percentage. But instead of the public here reckoning with that reality, the new circuit attorney is demonized for making that list. So I think it is a difference in St. Louis that there's still kind of a coming to terms and facing this reality of misconduct and corruption in our criminal justice system here.
You know, Detroit was under federal oversight for years and years and years. Our current police chief, James Craig, by all accounts, is doing a really, really good job. And the Wayne County prosecutor has a conviction integrity unit in place, which are people are getting out and she's doing a really good job. So those things, I mean, for most cities, I think those, I don't know about the federal oversight, but things need to happen. So we've had lots of people on the show, from professors at U of M, Professor Primus, and who I don't know if you know, are familiar with.
She is my professor for criminal procedure. I love her.
She was amazing. And so, we've had lots of experts about what can be done. And we've spent lots of times looking at where it begins with the attorneys who are assigned to these cases, and the great lengths that Michigan is doing to try to get people charged with something, the correct counsel, so they're not just railroaded through the whole system. But tell me, so our listeners are familiar with those types of things. What are you guys finding that's working, or are you or to prevent future problems, or is your focus more on getting the people out who were wrongfully convicted? And I think they're both important. And so maybe you're doing both, but somebody take me through that.
So in our office, I can speak about our office, and Megan, you can talk about MacArthur, because I think there's really amazing things that are coming out of MacArthur. In our office, we work when somebody is exonerated. We also work to change the policy about whatever the leading cause of wrongful conviction was for them. So if you look, for example, in the state of Kansas, where we've had a number of folks who've come home recently, as a result of them coming home, we were able to pass, recording of custodial interrogations. We were able to pass eyewitness identification reform. Kansas also became a state that provides compensation for people who are wrongfully convicted, when we never had that before, as a result of folks coming home and us really saying, you need to reckon with that. And we are looking at this right now with the client who came home last week. Mr. Pete Coons was convicted based on a jailhouse informant. And that's what we're going to be talking and bringing about change in Kansas as well, is to say, look, we know that that's what convicted Pete Coons and certainly other innocent Kansans. We need to change that. We do that in all of the states that we work in. We've passed a number of legislative initiatives in every state, I will say, except for Missouri. And we have to just talk about Missouri and what those things are. Because when we talk about change, we can talk about how we bring someone home and how those processes are, and we can talk about legislative changes, but we need to talk about transparency changes. We need to talk about what it means. We're talking about St. Louis and law enforcement, what it means that police unions have so much power that they get to investigate themselves, right, before anyone else gets to investigate them, that we don't have transparency of how law enforcement are disciplined and moved around and certified and decertified. Those are things that we need to be talking about and doing, but we also need to understand the role that every state actor has and plays. In our office, we always constantly ask people, do you know your prosecutor? And when we say, do you know your prosecutor, do you know your attorney general? Here in Missouri, we are litigating the case of Lamar Johnson, where the circuit attorney agrees Lamar's innocent based on her own investigation, filed a motion for a new trial for him. And the attorney general has stepped in and said, no, you don't have the power to do that. The state doesn't have the power to do that. Does not deny that the client is innocent, but is instead forcing him to sit there for years as they litigate this out. I mean, those are the real questions of who should have that power making and who should have that authority, and why would we ever have a system that allows people to impede justice? And so those are the things that I think about when I think about what citizens should be asking their legislatures at any moment. But Megan and MacArthur are also doing some really incredible work on.
I want to hear from Megan in a second, but I just wrote down 4 things. Number 1, why aren't you in Michigan? We're the Midwest. Come on, we are the queen. We're in the heart of the Midwest. We need you in Michigan.
You have amazing innocence organizations in Michigan right now, right? So you have the University of Michigan, the Michigan Innocence Project, and then the state appellate defender organization has an innocence organization there as well. So you have wonderful things going on.
But I don't know, who do we have in Michigan that's advocating the legislature for change? Who do we have in Michigan doing that?
Well, so there's a couple things.
Dave does that sometimes.
Yeah. Dave does that, and Dave Moran at the Michigan Innocence Project.
He's a busy guy, though, getting people out of prison.
Well, we're also, I mean, the same as you said for our organization as well. And then we all work closely with the Innocence Project, which is what most people are familiar with, right? Which is a DNA-only project based out of New York, but that does have a policy department that we work with closely as well, and would work in places like Michigan, does work with us in Kansas, Arkansas, Nebraska, Iowa. So, part of why the network is so important is we're able to really bolster all of our resources together and bring in, other folks who are convicted based on those issues from other states who can come and talk to legislatures about why it's so important, and they can say that.
So I love, Tricia, how you described, I take this, like, if something bad happens in a civil case, why did it happen and how is it not going to happen again? And I love that you're finding these problems in these cases, and then you're going to the legislature and say, look what just happened to my client. We need to change this law. And it sounds like you're getting some amazing traction with the legislature in Kansas and the governor, who are signing these bills into law, helping protect future people. How are you finding that they're receptive to your requests?
I think so. I think the biggest issue that comes up for every legislature generally is funding, right? How are they going to fund whatever change that you're asking in any given moment? But I think that the vast majority of people, the vast majority of Americans at least, I would say people around the world, have a real fundamental sense of fairness, right? And why would we let this happen to someone when we could fix it? And also, why would we want the state to pay to incarcerate the wrong person? Why would we want to hurt victims who have to go through this process over and over again as we figure out that the wrong person was wrongfully convicted, and maybe that wrong person went on to commit other crimes, right? Everyone really just understands the complete devastation that happens as soon as they talk to someone who is affected by this. And so I think everyone wants to do the right thing. Unfortunately, politics isn't always about doing the right thing, and so they have to find their way, right?
Right. And you mentioned the jailhouse informants. Every case that I've dove deep into on this wrongful conviction stuff, the 4 exonerees that I've interviewed on Open Mic, there's always except for one, there's a jailhouse informant. Mm-hmm. These are the scummiest people I've ever met. I had never met them, but I read about them, and I wouldn't want to meet them. They'll just lie to save their own asses, and it's so obvious what the prosecutors are doing and what the detectives and police are doing. So, what kind of laws can you get? Have you been successful in trying to keep that corruption to a minimum?
Yeah, so we did just pass a jailhouse reform bill in Nebraska. We're working on one in Kansas, and you can see some around the country. New Jersey also has done this kind of reform. But the 2 really big things that we look for is, one, asking for some sort of independent piece of evidence that would show the reliability of the jailhouse informant's testimony. So we have reliability hearings for other kinds of evidence, right? Scientific evidence and other things that come in. Why aren't we having reliability evidence for jailhouse informants when they're incentivized to have something that corroborates that what they're saying is true and accurate? So that's one thing that we're asking for. And the other thing that we're really asking for are centralized databases, so that prosecutors, when they use informants from all around the state, have to enter it into this database, and they always know what deals someone has received, right? What they received in exchange for, and how many cases that individual has testified in, so that they can meet their Brady obligations and give it over to the defense. What we've seen in some cases is even good prosecutors who want to give that over may not know that this in the jailhouse informant has testified in 25 other cases around the state, because that's not within their jurisdiction. But certainly there are also prosecutors who try to hide that. And if it's in a centralized location and everyone could know that, good prosecutors won't want to use those informants, and we'll be able to undermine those who would be nefarious and try to hide the use of them because of that centralized location.
And have you gotten those 3 asks passed in any one state?
New Jersey has a reliability hearing, and I'm not quite sure if I can remember if they have the database, because I'd have to go refer to the organizations that were there. But in Nebraska, we do have the database that is being implemented. That they will have to do that tracking system.
That's amazing. That would have solved. That would have solved the cases that I've investigated and researched. Right there. That's just amazing work. I wonder, and I don't know how to even find out if they're trying to get that passed in Michigan right now, but that is great work. All right, Megan, your turn. What's going on? Tell me some initiatives that you guys are working on to fix these problems right now.
Sure. Thank you. Well, at MacArthur, I think we have a couple different focuses across the country, but also here in Missouri. Here in Missouri specifically, we've been involved in a couple different class action lawsuits that's actually against the Missouri public defender system. We love public defenders. We love criminal defense attorneys. We don't want to have to sue them. It's just that there has been such a long-standing public defense crisis in Missouri, and all other avenues of addressing that problem at this point have been tried and failed. And so this lawsuit was kind of the last resort. And the public defender system is run by fantastic people who are trying to do the right thing, but have just not been able to get the state to do the right thing and give them the money, like the bare minimum of money you need to bare minimum of adequate representation. The reality here is that we're ranked in terms of our indigent defense at the bottom of the 50 states.
Wow.
Public defenders are repeatedly and for years put in the position of potentially being sued or disbarred or penalized for ethical violations, because it is simply impossible for them to meet their ethical obligations and constitutional obligations of representing an indigent criminal defendant with the number of cases they have and the limited resources that they have. So we have class action lawsuits. First, it was in federal court. Now there's a suit in state court suing them for their failure to meet their constitutional and ethical obligations. And the hope is that in the end, we can come to an agreement about the bare minimum standards that must be met, and it'll force the state's hand that they'll have to fund this if there is a court order in place. I know, Mike, I listened to some of your previous podcasts, and this has been a focus of yours, the truly abysmal state of representation for many of the people who are ultimately exonerated. Sometimes that comes from private attorneys. My Detroit case, Devontae Sanford, I'm sure you're familiar now with Robert Slamica, which is just such an appropriate name, I think, for his attorney, who was ultimately disbarred and did nothing to represent him. And in fact, Devontae pled guilty in the middle of his trial because it became clear his attorney was going to literally do nothing. And so he may as well take a deal. But it also comes from the public defender system, especially here in Missouri. And I want to be clear that for the vast majority of cases, I do not think that is the fault of the individual attorneys. I think people become public defenders because they are passionate about this cause, but they're working with their hands and feet tied behind their back. I mean, there's nothing they can do with the resources that they're being given. The other thing in Missouri that I didn't mention is many of our counties have wait lists. So, and that's been the solution adopted by the state when there aren't resources to give the attorneys to represent the people. So people will sit in jails for months, for years, before even meeting with their attorney. And sometimes that's on very low level charges. So you might spend more time in jail waiting for your attorney to be appointed than you would even spend if you were ultimately convicted and sentenced for the crime.
Don't get me started on the bail problem here. Please, oh man, we just had the bail project. A couple of the people from the bail project on a podcast a month or two ago. I mean, we could spend another 5 hours on that. These people should not be in prison. And I was reading an article recently, or jail, I should say, but that COVID has been a big helper with all this, which I was very pleased to see, that the jails are not empty, but
some of them letting people out. Yeah. And finally, at least we have the Bail Project, which is now in cities across the country and doing really, really incredible work.
There's one in Detroit. People don't even know they're here. It doesn't cost them anything. They make one phone call, and they're out, and it gets paid back once the matter is resolved. I mean, it's just what a wonderful organization that is, right?
Absolutely.
So you heard, I don't know if you heard the podcast with John Shea, the Michigan.
I didn't. No.
So he's running, or he's in charge of the, I don't remember the technical name of the Michigan organization through the state that's trying to fix the public defender system. And, the lawsuit that you're talking about, I mean, are you gaining traction on that to try to get some change, or is it in the throes of it right now?
It's actually going to trial next week. So TBD.
Stay tuned.
Check back with us. Exactly.
But one of the things that I try to do here is, like, if there's people who are facing a charge, this isn't just for professionals. I have lots of clients in Detroit who listen, and I've gotten lots of feedback around the country. And I struggle with even asking this question, but these people are usually poor, they're uneducated, they can't afford their own attorneys. They're handed an attorney who is an attorney. They have a license, and there's really no way to know. You can't really go on Google and check their star rating, right? You can't, in every case that I've looked at, all the attorneys, I don't think there's one that hasn't been disbarred, reprimanded, grieved after the convictions. And these people, after these people have done many years of prison, there's not like a watchdog group where somebody can get charged, talk to their lawyer, tell them about an alibi defense, for example, and they ignore it. The judges don't care in a lot of these cases. The prosecutors certainly don't care. What can these people do? I mean, is there an answer to that question?
I think the question isn't what can the folks who are defendants can do, but what should we be doing, right, as citizens, as a system? Because the reality is we cannot put more burden on people who are in such an unfair and an untenable situation, right? So, I think what we think about is when you're talking about, there's both public defenders and prosecutors who aren't held accountable for their actions, right? And part of that is because who governs lawyers? Lawyers govern lawyers, right? So either one, people don't file bar complaints, or they do, and lawyers don't want to do anything about it because they imagine, well, what if that were me? What if and we've all go through times in our lives where things are awful. And so sometimes you can see someone who is ineffective and you can think, man, were they going through a divorce and losing their house and all of these things where they may have been distracted, right? And we should find them ineffective, but maybe they should lose their bar license. And so that's what happens is when we go to bar complaint authorities is they say, well, it's fine, right? And so there are questions about that. What should be that accountability? And then I think there are very real questions about who we create as lawyers and who we invite into the system. And I say that, my name is Tricia Rojo Bushnell. I am one of 2% of all lawyers that are Latina, right? And when we create a public defender association, or we create a legal community that is filled with predominantly white folks and predominantly white folks who come from middle class or upper class backgrounds, we are making it where we are not able to communicate clearly and have cultural barriers that keep us from hearing our clients and hearing what's happening. I think of so many cases where the alibi was said and not investigated because someone didn't understand it, because they thought it sounded crazy, right? The very first case I ever worked on when I was a law student, it was a death penalty case where our client was innocent. He was selling drugs on the side of the road, and he had pawned the drugs for the car that the real perpetrator had stolen from the victim. And the public defenders couldn't understand that people would lease a car, in essence, right, for the use of drugs, because they don't come from a background where they understand not having a car. So I think we are also in a really critical point where we have to be reckoning with systemic racism's role in this, not just in prosecuting people, not just in convicting people, but in keeping people out of positions to represent other people of color, right? We have court reporters who are predominantly white, who don't understand the African-American vernacular, who are transcribing the words incorrectly that are coming out of someone's mouth. And I just think I cannot say what else should this defendant be doing. Is more of how many ways can we oppress them is really the way that I think about it.
Your point is well taken. I mean, it was a bad question, but it's I don't have an answer when people come to me. And the other bad question, the other thing that you just touched on, Tricia, is, when I tell my kids and family and clients and people watch these podcasts, was the prosecutor charged, held accountable? One of the cases that we talked about on one of my podcasts, it turns out that the judge and the prosecutor were having a romantic relationship. Neither one of them ever held accountable. One's still a judge, the other's still a prosecutor. Is anybody ever held accountable? And at least in Michigan, we have governmental immunity is clear. You can't really pierce that. The cops aren't even being held accountable. Cops who are putting bad lineups, jailhouse snitches that they know. I mean, we have a case. We covered a case where the prosecutor, the detective, left the facts in front of a jailhouse informant, left the room, let him read it, let him testify. Guy does many, many years in prison until this jailhouse snitch comes around and says, "Yeah, this is what happened." Did anything happen to the prosecutor and the detective? No, never. So
I've been following what happened to the two key bad actor cops in Devontae Sanford's case. And from what I can tell, one of them's still on Detroit police force. He has, I think, been changed to a different department, but much, much later, like as in only a year or two ago. And the other one has now admitted he wholly manufactured the key linchpin evidence that kept 14-year-old Devontae in prison for a decade. He went on to be the chief of police in 2 other Michigan jurisdictions, and I think is still the chief in one of those.
He was in Highland Park last. What was his name again?
Tolbert.
Yeah, he was in Highland Park, which is a suburb in Detroit, and I think that there was an uproar and that he got fired, I believe.
I think Flint had the benefit of having him for a while before Highland Park. Yeah.
And the prosecutors become judges, right? So the prosecutor that used a jailhouse informant and did all this exact same the process that you're talking about in Missouri in Ryan Ferguson's case is now a judge, Judge Crane. He still sits there, right? Megan and I have a case where I represented one of the co-defendants as he was getting exonerated, and Megan now represents one of the co-defendants in her civil case, where we won on what's called a Youngblood claim, right? That they destroyed evidence. And they'd used this informant that they hadn't disclosed to anyone to get this confession out of a co-defendant, all of these things. The prosecutor in that case is an Arkansas Supreme Court judge. I mean, so, these are the things that we have to sort of bring to light, because I think when we talk about them, everyone's like, that cannot be, and that's the system, right? Like, that's where.
But they're so protected. I'm not seeing any good movement, at least in Michigan, I'll tell you that, holding these people accountable, because they're just keeping going up in the ranks and nobody cares. They move city. I mean, is your organization like in the Devontae Sanford? I mean, I think he got some compensation, but
he did. He was actually the first case. So you did ask about who's doing the legislative advocacy in Michigan. I know Dave Moran with some other partners in Michigan were the ones who advocated and got the Michigan state compensation bill passed. And obviously, I think they and everyone wishes it was better and there wasn't the cap, but they got it passed. So good on them. And I think Devontae was the first one to get an award under that bill. So he got, I think, I shouldn't be throwing out a number, but it was under $500,000. It did not compensate for losing your childhood growing up in prison and a decade behind bars in an adult facility. But sorry, the question, I lost the thread of the question. So what's MacArthur doing for it though?
Well, I'm just curious if are you guys going in, and even if the laws are against, which they are, and you know that they are bad cops, like in this,
way MacArthur's taking that on is in, I've heard you talk about this before, but the qualified immunity setting. So that's a step further, right? What we're talking about right now is just being disciplined by their own institutions, which seems like it should be the more obvious and easier step to take than overcoming these big legal hurdles like qualified immunity. That needs to be happening. And it's part of why it is so incredibly frustrating to me that when circuit attorneys and prosecutors take the step of making like an exclusion list, which, not to say that's an easy thing to do, but that's a small step in what we're talking about, right? It's not firing people. It's not disciplining them in other ways that affect their livelihood. It's just putting them on a list and saying, at least I'm not going to take cases from you. And there is such a backlash here to that, and that infuriates me. But MacArthur is focused on the legal side of it. What happens when you do sue the bad actors? And I've heard you talk about it, Mike. Most of the time, they are completely insulated and protected by this legal doctrine of qualified immunity. We won't get into the weeds of that because that's a whole nother show, and there's probably someone much smarter than me that should talk to you about it. I can tell you someone within MacArthur you can talk to, because our appellate and Supreme Court office in DC, this is a key focus for them. And they are working across the country to identify the best cases to be bringing qualified immunity cases up through the appellate courts to try to chip away at and ultimately take down this doctrine. The good news is that it is an issue in which there is actually some bipartisan support. A lot of conservative justices actually are troubled by qualified immunity also. So I think there is reason to be optimistic about us making headway in that regard. The institutional and the political problem about terminating people, disciplining them is a separate one.
Well, if everybody's, go ahead, Trish.
I was gonna say, the other thing to remember is, that's talking about the litigation strategy to change and end qualified immunity, but there is also a legislative strategy. Now, certainly not in our states, that's not what's happening, but around the country, you are seeing some jurisdictions, small and larger, looking at ending qualified immunity through legislative processes, particularly after the summer, right, when we've seen how many Black folks who have been shot and killed by police, where communities are now saying, wait, they cannot be held accountable because of this. And so I think that we may see some changes in the next legislative sessions from places, not in my region, but somewhere else that may tackle it.
We got to
get it. We've had the Daily Show talking about it, and I've seen a lot of other pop culture things doing features on qualified immunity, which makes me really happy. And they managed to make it sexy and funny and interesting. So.
Yeah, and I get yelled at sometimes by viewers and fellow lawyers that I don't do enough explaining, but for the lay people out there, just, when a judge or a prosecutor or even, cops do bad things, the laws shield them from civil liability, from paying money, from being held accountable criminally and civilly. And that's what we're talking about, is trying to lower those shields. So if these really bad actors who locked up 14-year-old Devontae Sanford and the prosecutors and everybody who was complicit in that should be held accountably both civilly and criminally, in my opinion, and I'm sure in your guys' opinions. And hopefully, the laws will change soon. Tricia, I know before we run out of time, tell us, you had something exciting happen in your office last week. You're right there in the heart of it right now. Just take me what happened to your client and the good news that you got last week, please.
Sure. So last week, client Olin Pete Coons was exonerated and released. The prosecutor dismissed all charges against him same day. A judge made his ruling from the bench same day after serving over 12 years wrongfully convicted for a crime he didn't commit. It's like all cases, it's a tragedy and a complicated case. He had been convicted of a double homicide, or what the state had said was a double homicide that was actually turned out to be a murder-suicide. So Pete's father and sister had a caregiver who was embezzling from his father and neglecting him, and had taken a number of his assets, and Pete was suing her. And they were in these back and forth litigation after his father had died and passed away. And essentially she then killed her husband and killed herself, and framed it to make it look like Pete did it by calling her mother and saying, Pete's here, he's threatening to kill us, and he's taking the lawnmower. But what we now know is that the state had all of this evidence, one, that she was going to be committing suicide. They had already been investigating her for embezzlement from her bank where she worked at. She'd stolen over $11,000 over the last 90 days. And there was a missing fourth bullet that the medical examiner, when we found it, working with the conviction integrity unit, when it was discovered, the medical examiner changed his manner of death to murder-suicide. And most importantly, the jailhouse informant who was used to convict Mr. Coons, all of the tragedies that you hear in all these cases, all of the ways in which he had asked for a deal that weren't disclosed, all of the ways in which, there were a number of letters that were written to the prosecutor, which he only disclosed two of, where he's talking about all of the things that he wants, that he tried to get another deal against a different defendant when he didn't get something out of this, that the prosecutor abused what's called the Inquisition statute. He threatened this snitch with jail time if he didn't say what he wanted him to say. So all of these things came out. We had a 4-day evidentiary hearing. At the end of it, the judge ruled from the bench, made those findings that the state had improperly suppressed all of that evidence. The prosecutor dismissed the charges, and Pete came home.
I got chills.
Yeah.
That's a great frickin' result.
It is.
And how many, I mean, it's a long time. How many years did it take or months did it take when the day you heard of this person until he got out?
Well, so this is what's an important discovery, in that this is a case that actually came out of a conviction integrity unit here in Wyandotte County, Kansas City, Kansas. So we just talked about St. Louis, right? And the 2 first Black prosecutors elected there. In Wyandotte County, Mark Dupree is the first Black prosecutor to have ever been elected in the entire state of Kansas. And then when our client, Lamont McIntyre, was exonerated a few years ago, when he agreed to join that motion and dismiss the charges that day, he founded the Conviction Integrity Unit. And this is the first case that came out of that. So
Wow.
Mr. Coons had written to them, they started that investigation, and then we came on to sort of finish it, work it from the defense side, and to present all of the evidence for the court. And so, it was a much quicker process, right? It was probably about 1.5 to 2 years, but it's still a long time. Mm-hmm.
It's still a long time, and that person's waiting. These conviction integrity units are so important. In my hometown of Oakland County, Michigan, you're going to be hearing, we just voted in a very progressive prosecutor, and one of her first tasks, I had her on the podcast, was going to be setting up a conviction integrity unit. The current prosecutor that she unseated, I interviewed on the podcast, has said, no need. We don't convict. We don't wrong.
Yeah.
She got ousted. Karen McDonald is gonna take oath, I don't know when, January sometime. And I volunteered to be on her board because I think that these, I mean, I love, Tricia, that it came from within. That is just, when I first heard about this, and it's probably been a year now, these are relatively new units. Mm-hmm. It's kind of mind-blowing that they're hiring really good people within the organization to review the cases that happen within the organization, the watchdog, the internal watchdog, and they're being effective. I mean, it's a game changer in your work, both of you, don't you think?
Absolutely. And it was part of we would have done this partnership anyways, but it's part of what made the timing for this partnership here in Missouri and in St. Louis so fantastic, because we have a unique moment of opportunity here in St. Louis. Now, our St. Louis City and our St. Louis County prosecutor's offices both have conviction integrity units. They call them by different names, but they both have them, and they're both receiving significant funding. And so to be able to collaborate and potentially have access to the files and potentially team up like Tricia has done in Lamar Johnson's case, it is absolutely a game changer.
So
to speed up the timelines and make exonerations possible that without access to the prosecutor's files and potentially previously hidden evidence would have simply never been possible. Those people would have definitely stayed behind bars.
And the testing that can happen, right? So it's what's in the files that we can't have access to. So everything we knew about the jailhouse informant here, right, was sitting in the prosecutor's file, and they handed it over, which we wouldn't have been able to have if they hadn't given it over. And there's additional testing. So in this case, which was the murder-suicide case, right, no one had ever tested the gunshot residue, which showed that the only person with gunshot residue was one of the victims, Kathleen Schroll, and it was on her left hand, and only her left hand. And if we had wanted to do that and we didn't have cooperation, we would have had to litigate it. We may have already had to file a petition to get discovery, to do all of these different things, and that itself can take years. The prosecutor can just say, send it out, go test it, crime lab, and you get it back right away. So it's just a completely different ballgame.
Mm-hmm.
As I was going through your website, Tricia, I saw that you had another case, this Michael Polite, another 14-year-old. You guys are doing amazing work. If any of our listeners, any of our viewers want to help, I'm sure that you guys are based a lot on donations from private citizens. I'm sure you get a lot, hopefully you get a lot from your states and federal government. But how can people help you guys?
Yeah, well, the biggest way for us is you go to our website, which is www.themip.org, and you can learn about a bunch of different ways to participate. Our annual report is actually about to come out. In our annual report, which will be also digital, we will have different things that you can send to legislatures, things you can send to clients, things you can send to prosecutors, asking for them to look into creating conviction integrity units, asking them to provide funding for things like video conferencing for folks who are deaf and disabled so that they can adequately speak with their attorneys, right, and translate those things. So, every single thing that citizens do supports our work just by being vocal and sharing. And so if you want to go to our website, follow us on Twitter, go on Facebook, any of those things, that's just a great way to keep spreading the word.
And I will say this, first of all, I love that it's you. It's some great t-shirts and sweatshirts on your website that I plan to buy. I got lots of the black.
Buy the swag.
The Michigan, not the Michigan, the from New York, the Innocence Project. I have the black shirts. I should have worn one today. And I'm going to make this pledge. You come to Michigan, you set up a shop in Michigan, and I will help. I will help. I'll help financially. I'll help emotionally. I'll help staff it. We need one. Michigan, like U of M, is beyond great. I feel so lucky that they're here. But having an arm of something like this, like the MIP, feels more organized, and it just seems like every state needs that. And I commend you for your work, Tricia. And Megan, tell me about how people could support the MacArthur Center.
Well, also you can go to our website, MacArthurJustice.org, and there is a page for the Wrongful Conviction Project specifically there. So read about our project, read about our cases, but we are in partnership with MIP, so I encourage donations to MIP, and those will support our project as well.
Do you have t-shirts in your website or no?
Good question. I'm ashamed to say I don't know off the top of my head. I know we have t-shirts,
all right,
and if they're not on our website, they should be, so I'll work on that.
Well, I know go ahead.
I did want to say, Mike, just about coming to Michigan, I think it's probably a long down the line or unrealistic that we'll have like a brick and mortar shop there. But I wanted to make clear that we absolutely, I think Tricia referenced it, but we absolutely do partner with Michigan and with the University of Michigan. When I did Devontae Sanford's case, I was an out-of-state attorney affiliated with the Center on Wrongful Convictions of Youth at Northwestern in Chicago, and we did it as co-counsel. So that possibility always exists that we may be on a case with Dave Moran and be helping a Michigan case. And through the Innocence Network, we absolutely are always partnering on reform, pushes for reform and legislative advocacy. And so I think in some ways, U of M Clinic is already an arm of, the Innocence Project and the Midwest Innocence Project.
And the one thing I will just tag on to that is that the Innocence Network does also have a website, innocencenetwork.org, that you can go to, and you can learn not only about the Innocence organization that's in your region. So all of the members of the network are there. You can find out how to get to their website, find more about them. And there, you can see briefs that we file, and what are called amicus briefs, the friend of the court's brief, the issues that we're looking at. We celebrate Wrongful Conviction Day together, the conference that we host every year. So there's lots of great information, no matter where you're at the Innocence Network website.
And often one of the best ways to support is just be out there in the world on social media, tweeting, Facebook posting about the cases that are really active and need voices to be loud and be heard on their behalf. And so that's a great way to help too.
It's a really good point there, Megan, because we'll put all your stuff in our show notes. But one reason I do the show is these types of episodes is to just educate people, because you don't know if somebody's going to be a juror. If somebody's going to be charged with something, if somebody's going to be able to have some influence over something, if somebody's going to be a witness of something, and how important it is to realize that these problems are happening. And it does kind of feel, I don't know if I want to use the word groundswell yet. It does feel, though, that more and more convictions are being overturned, and word is getting out there. And I don't know if you saw the gentleman on America's Got Talent, who was incarcerated for 30 years.
I missed that.
That made me cry, that episode. Every time, I can't watch it too much. And but I know some people who are representing him, and but it feels like it's out there more. Do you guys get the same sense that is there a groundswell?
I mean, I think it is. I think the biggest thing that is shocking to me is when students come up and say that this is what they want to do for a living. Like, when, I don't think I'm that old, but when I was in law school, that's not a thing you said, right? And a lot of us, most of us got into this through other avenues, right? A lot of us have been former death penalty attorneys. And I will say in our office, we often say, if you only want to work just for innocent folks, this might not be the best job for you, because everything is more nuanced than people think it is. Even if you are only representing innocent folks, there's a lot that comes with that and working into changing the criminal legal system. But I do think people are talking about it. Students talk about it. Folks talk about it in ways that, we used to be an aberration when you told somebody that what you were doing, and people would be like, nobody's innocent in prison. And now people are like, oh, I just read about so-and-so on the news.
Dave Moran told me at lunch at Zingerman's a few months ago.
I love Zingerman's.
That was for you. That people go to Michigan Law School because of the Innocence Clinic. And I thought that was amazing. I actually have a senior in college in Wisconsin right now who I'm trying to talk to law school. She's like, well, Dad, the personal injury stuff, I'm not so sure. But if I could do some innocent stuff at your office and some civil rights stuff, maybe.
Tell her to give us a call.
That right now.
Yeah, tell her to give us a call. We'll sell her on it. It doesn't take much to sell on, and we all take externs all the time. So.
Do you?
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
All right. I got your information. I'm going to be emailing you both. Thank you so much for being here. I feel like we just scratched the surface. We may have to do some follow-ups in the future when we have some more time. But thank you both for being here. It meant a lot.
This was really fun. Thank you so much for having us.
Thanks for watching Open Mic. That was an interesting episode with Tricia Rojo Bushnell, the director of the Midwest Innocence Project, and Megan Crane of the MacArthur Justice Center. I learned a bunch. These people are doing amazing work for the Michigan Innocence Project. Not the Michigan, the Midwest Innocence Project. We need a Michigan Innocence Project. I was blown away by some of their stories. Please donate to the causes if you feel moved by any of these stories. Please share this episode with people who need to hear it. Subscribe to our show, like our show, email me, and I look forward to hearing from you and seeing you next time on Open Mic.